Welcome to Blaze News, the mandate day 26. I'm Jill Savage. Tonight on the agenda, House Speaker Mike Johnson managed to narrowly pass his reconciliation bill late last night, flipping 3 out of 4 Republican holdouts for a final vote of 217 to 215. But things got a little chaotic on Capitol Hill. Speaker Johnson actually moved to scrap the vote around 7:30 p.m. Eastern since there weren't enough votes there. But that wasn't the end of the story. As Jake Sherman from Punchbowl News wrote on X, in my 15 years covering Congress, I've never seen leadership cancel a vote, send the lawmakers home, and then abruptly switch course and put up the vote, all within a course of about 10 minutes. Well, it's all because President Trump called Representative Victoria Spartz. So then Johnson's team had the number of votes they needed and called the lawmakers back in for that vote and got it done. And all of this means that the House and Senate now each have their own budget bills passed, with the Senate acting as the backup. In a Truth Social post, President Trump wrote that he hopes that both chambers of Congress can agree on making the tax cuts permanent. And the Trump administration has launched a $1 billion investment into countering the egg shortage by combating the avian flu. Agricultural Secretary Brooke Rollins has stated that the Biden administration caused the crisis by killing 1 million chickens rather than addressing the bird flu outbreak. Well, earlier today, President Trump held his first cabinet meeting, with Elon Musk assessing the talent assembled in the room.
President Trump has put together, I think, the best cabinet ever. Literally. So, I do not give false praise. This is an incredible group of people. I don't think such a talented team has actually ever been assembled. I think it's literally the best cabinet that the country has ever had. And I think the company should be incredibly appreciative of the people in this room.
Those meetings largely focus on slashing government waste and balancing the nation's budget as early as next year. The Washington Post is looking for a new opinion editor after owner Jeff Bezos announced that the publication has parted ways with David Shipley. Now, this came after Bezos pitched Shipley to the vision for the opinion section that's going to be focused on personal liberties and free markets, and Shipley declined the opportunity to lead the paper in this direction. Meanwhile, CNN's Jake Tapper decided to write a book on the cover-up of the Joe Biden mental health decline called Original Sin. And yet, here's Jake Tapper engaging in that very cover-up when arguing with Laura Trump. Watch.
I think what we see on stage with Joe Biden, Jake, is very clearly a cognitive decline. Okay. That's what I'm referring to. It makes me uncomfortable to watch somebody on stage
That's so amazing. It's so amazing to me that
try and figure out an answer.
A cognitive decline.
Well, when you're trying to tell me that what I was suggesting was
I think that you were mocking his stutter. Yeah, I think you were mocking his stutter, and I think you have absolutely no standing to diagnose somebody's cognitive decline.
It's going to be interesting to see that book when it does finally come out. And finally, Blaze Media senior editor for politics, Chris Bedford, made history today as the first member of Blaze Media to participate in the White House press pool.
Thank you, Mr. Musk. Are there about half of the government employees so far appear to have responded to your request for what they've been doing over the past week? Is there a timeline in place for next moves for people being fired, and when can people expect to see results of that?
Yes. Well, to be clear, I think that email perhaps was misinterpreted as a performance review, but actually it was a pulse check review. Do you have a pulse? Do you have a pulse and 2 neurons? So if you have a pulse and 2 neurons, you can reply to an email. This is, I think not a high bar.
It's not a high bar. Now for a pulse check for Matthew Peterson. Let's go ahead and bring him into the show, MP, alive and well. And we do see a very big day for Blaze Media. We get Chris Bedford in the White House press pool. So what does this say about the changing media landscape?
This is a new golden age. This is a completely new era. Everything you thought you knew about the media, everything you thought about the ranking system of the media, it's done. It's over. Legacy media is over. We are here to stay. And what you see today is Blaze Media taking a step that really started all the way back when Glenn Beck founded this organization. All the people who struggled for a long time against the mainstream media, which, mainstream because they just monopolized things like the White House press pool and forced everyone they didn't like out of their cool kids, club. And now we're talking about actual just, and fair media access, and we're not going anywhere. This is just the beginning of a long and beautiful coverage of the White House and a whole lot more besides.
Well, I look at this, and we can even just go back to Jake Tapper, right? And the book that he is putting out, the interview that we just watched that clip of with Lara Trump. It's so incredibly necessary to have a media that is going to stand up to the legacy media, because you can't trust anything that they're saying. Because in this one instance, you have Jake Tapper saying, "Oh, Joe Biden's fine. I think you're just mocking his stutter," to him now going and writing the actual book about Joe Biden's decline.
Here's the thing. These people are clowns. They're not trustworthy. I mean, think about what happened today. Chris Bedford is one of the most qualified and excellent journalists in this country. And I don't say that lightly. And he got exactly what he deserved, a place at the table at the White House press pool. This is a huge, you want to say it's a huge win. It's exactly what should be happening. We should be going to Washington and talking to people and getting press badges. That's exactly what we're doing. We're just walking forward into that situation where we're just going to be leading, and we leave clowns like that behind, because people ultimately are going to trust over time the people who actually do the work, who do the job, and that's what we're going to do, and that's what they haven't done, and they're going to whine and cry about it for a long time, but eventually they'll get over it, and it doesn't matter. I don't care. We're in charge now.
Well, speaking of things that are going on in Washington, D.C., Speaker Johnson going through saying, we're going to vote. Now we're not. It's like he loves me not. Like the little girl, like pulling a daisy. And okay, are we going to vote tonight? Are we not? You guys can all go home. No, wait, hold on. I changed my mind. Come back. We're going to vote.
Look, it's a complicated business.
It is.
It's a complicated business. I would regard this as sort of the engine starting to crank in Congress, and it's going to be a little jumpy at first. It may not turn on right away. You may not be able to just push the button, but what's happening is good energy. It's moving. It's starting to move, and it's starting to crank up. We'll give it some time.
We don't have one of those push start cars. We have to go back and turn the actual keys still. So, okay, yes. We will give it time. We'll also come back with Steve Deace, who will explain to us why he thinks that RFK Jr. could be the most consequential cabinet pick ever. Don't go anywhere. Well, did you know that 85% of grass-fed beef in stores is actually imported? That's thanks to a 2015 law change. It all says that foreign meat can now be labeled product of the United States just because it's packaged here. And that means that the grocery store meat is often full of antibiotics and hormones and seed oils, but Good Ranchers is different. They're 100% American meat. They don't have any hidden additives, no seed oils. It's just clean, high-quality protein. And their beef, chicken, and seafood are all born, raised, and harvested right here in the United States, so you know exactly where your food comes from. Good Ranchers delivers straight to your door, so you can skip all the grocery store hassle and get the farm-to-table quality while supporting American farms and ranches. They have their New Year, New Meat promo going on right now, and you can get free ground beef, chicken breast, or wild-caught salmon in your order for a year, plus $25 off with the code Jill at checkout. So don't wait. Go order now. It's Good Ranchers. American meat delivered. Well, there have been a lot of promises made. So how has President Trump kept his promises and pushed the MAGA mandate? Well, Steve Deace joins us here in studio, host of the Steve Deace Show. We love it when you're down here in Dallas. So a lot of optimism between the three of us. I don't know how I feel about this right now, but how is Trump actually getting this done, pushing his mandate forward and making the three of us smile all at the same time?
Well, I like plans. I'm not big into details. Okay, I think you've got to be flexible within the plan. All right, but there does have to be a plan. Okay, and it's very clear from day one of this administration there was a plan, and it is very detailed. It is very orchestrated. What you're watching politically, frankly, is something we've never really seen. Because in the previous media eras of the presidency, we don't know what went on on day to day in the first 100 days. We didn't have media coverage like back then like we do now. And in the media era, presidents have always put a focus on the first 100 days, and that usually meant there was an issue of the week, a talking point of the week. And we've never seen anything like what the Trump White House has done here, which is really an amphibious assault. It's a D-Day level assault. I mean, they have attacked the left in the spirit of the age on not just 5 beaches in northern France, but about 20 different issue fronts. And I mean, it's like every day there's another round of executive orders. And yeah, these are all going to end up in the courts. They're going to all have to be legislated out in many cases and fought out. But at the very least, what's happening here is he is framing the debate. And he's framing the debate around issues, and the debates, those issues debates are being framed in the framing that we would prefer. All right. And any good general, before he puts the troops into battle, is going to frame, he's going to shape the battlefield to try to, you can't, once the bullets start flying, things become organic. You can't plot it out in great detail, but you want to have your troops with a plan in the best position possible to succeed. And that's what the Trump White House has done. And I'll just tell you, like in my home state of Iowa, just to kind of give you guys one example, just how this is, to use the era, Matt, when you and I were growing up, trickle down. We are having, a civil war in Iowa right now. We're trying to become the first state in the union to just get rid of all the training madness, not just, women's sports, but like out of the code. No gender identity, none of it. Get rid of all of it. And every person that the Des Moines Register polled before the last election, apparently, has lived at our legislature for the last 2 weeks. And we've just not, Iowans are nice Midwestern people. They're not used to seeing this kind of behavior. And several Republicans were getting squishy here in the decisive week. Well, we went to war with them, and you know what we did? We took Trump's comments about the Maine governor right to her face on Friday, and we held those up to those guys and said, "Hey, this is the leader of the party, man. You got to step up. And this is where our base is at right now. This is what they expect. This isn't going to cut it." Iowa nice, while they're down here in their 75 nose rings and their Joseph Technicolored hair, okay, like his dream coat, screaming and seething like it's a scene out of the New Testament. They're not going to take this lying down. Follow the leadership of the president. Do you know how often I have been able to do that in my career? And I wasn't like making it up. Okay, hoping they didn't Google search me to fact check it. This actually happened.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. And so that's an example of where we are. I mean, and leadership wins. And what you need to make in every era of human history, leadership wins. You just hope that it's good leadership.
This is, I mean, I know that we all really are in the same boat. When we say that, we feel the same feelings here, which is just almost disbelief at all the things being done right, including laying out the argument beforehand, as you say. But all that's said, the amazing thing about what we're seeing is it hasn't even begun yet, right? I mean, they're not actually implementing a lot of policies yet in terms of agencies. They're just revving up with all the Avengers assembling, laying out the plans. Like they haven't even begun to implement all the plans. So looking at the future, as great as this has been, as historic as it has been, what are some of the big things that you want to see, that the bigger tasks that are going to take 1-2 years or more change when it comes to structural change?
The number one thing that I think needs to happen, and listen, I'll take things, Alex, I never thought I was going to have to say in my political career for $1,000, okay? But when I started doing this 19 years ago, I never thought I was going to end up on a big national platform. I was going to say, we really need to see people go to prison. But I do think the biggest thing that needs to happen is we need the pilot episode of Happy Days, Matt, okay? And that's where someone decided to say yes to Fonzie. I'll join you in the men's room. I'll step into your office. And then after that happened once, brother, every episode of Happy Days for the next 10 years, Fonzie asked at least one time, would you like to step into my office? What was the answer every time for the next 10 years? I'm good. We're good here, all right? An example needs to be made. All right. And let's be realistic. As much as I love our buddy Jesse Kelly, we're not going to get a parade of orange jumpsuits as much as I could fetishize that, frankly, tonight. But that's probably not going to happen. It's not realistic. But we're going to need to make example. There needs to be an example made out of somebody or a few somebodies. Even subtle things like Tulsi Gabbard right away. Hey, yeah, we're going to fire. We fired all 100 of those degenerates on that chat room. All right. Well, the next thing to do, send Kash Patel and Dan Bongino in to search all their computers. Because I'm guessing somewhere buried there in the deleted files of their search history are some things we'd probably arrest people for, if you know what I'm saying, all right? There needs to be somewhere some form of example made. All right. We have to reestablish our social compact is broken. And in order to repair it, so we don't end up in a civil war, frankly, in order to repair it, we need to go back to mutually assured destruction. And so this year, there are over 300% more people at the National Religious Broadcasters Convention in Dallas this week than there were a year ago. Why? Because a lot of those people were probably hiding, thinking, I'm not showing myself because if we lose the election, we're going to prison. Now it's like, breathe the free air again, King Theodore. We can come out and be Christians again, right? Well, that fear should never exist in a free society, no matter how divisive the issues get, to restore that fear on the other end so that when they get power again, because eventually they will, and they will learn, all right, we can't go there because if we go there, this is how they're going to respond, right? An example does have to be made. Someone must be punished, and in public and severely, or at least a group of someone's must be punished for everything that's been done to the country for the last few years to make an example. Otherwise, something wicked this way comes. To me, that's the biggest thing that has to be accomplished.
You always say when something has to be done with COVID, there must be a reckoning that will be coming. I know you've talked about RFK Jr. a lot. You have said publicly that you think that he might be the most consequential cabinet pick of our lifetime. Mm-hmm. I look at what is laid out in front of him, the opportunity that is there. What do you see on the table for him?
The number one thing is conviction. I don't know anybody in American society today that's active at any level of politics that has sacrificed more for his convictions than Robert F. Kennedy has. And you're talking about someone who's been excommunicated from the closest thing America's ever had to a royal family. The amount of money he's lost, the prestige he's lost, the connections he's lost. These are things that if we're just average people, we could never understand what it means to be born into a family like that and then just tossed aside, frankly, for being right most of the time. Okay. And I think with that conviction comes resolve. And I think now he's ready. Bobby has said several times, he's prayed for years that God would give him the power to address the chronic health epidemic in America. He's 70 years old. He has been through, both sides of the aisle. He has seen how both sides operate, where the bodies are buried. He's taken every punch he can take. He is ready now, I think, to lead. And you got to wait until you've got the people in place at CDC and NIH who are really those are the agencies that actually carry out what he would say from above at HHS. All right. And so when you get Dr. Weldon in there, when you get Marty Makary in there, you get Jay Bhattacharya especially in there, now you'll have your range and your arms around the bureaucracy. But even just today, subtle things like, we're not going to do that exploration of the, now we're going to give you oral poison that doesn't work, all right, with the COVID genetic serums. All right. That's just one step of what could be done here in a massive paradigm shift of how we live our lives day to day. I mean, there are things I've learned from Bobby Kennedy I didn't know. I had no idea there's like 27 more ingredients in like a Ritz cracker or something here than there is in Canada. What's the benign and innocent explanation for that, right? Before I started losing weight about 10 years ago, my wife and I went to, and you grew up in Iowa like I did, Jill, Living History Farms, right? We went to their like farmhouse 1905 theme dinner, right? Okay. Yeah. And they're bringing out all this food, man. And I'm like, holy crap, these people ate like pigs. Why were they not all morbidly obese? And they're like, well, everything's made from scratch.
We churned our own butter, by the way, at Living History Farms.
Everything's made with like 7 ingredients. Yeah. Oh, and these people were actually
on the middle of Iowa, sitting right here. I'm in the middle of Iowa on either side of me.
Well, these people were on their feet working all day, number one. Number two, they had like 7 ingredients and made their own food, right? Something is wrong. Matt, when you and I were growing up, we didn't know what a peanut butter allergy was. And in fact, we thought peanut butter was a food group and we intravenously shot it into our veins.
Yes.
Okay. When our parents were like, here, take a jar of peanut butter and shut up. Now, everybody, what has happened here? It doesn't make any sense. We need answers to this. And that's a basic fundamental way of how we live life. A lot of the issues we talk about are up here in the meta, that if you're just, driving a ready mix truck today in Dallas, Texas, pouring somebody's garage, you know about them, maybe care, but they don't touch you. The stuff Bobby Kennedy's talking about touch everybody's lives, and they have greatly impacted the way we've lived our lives in the last generation, for sure. It's changed a lot.
It's interesting how, we are talking about reimagining the American way of life in the 21st century. That's really what's at stake in many ways. So what do you think when you think about Blaze and what we should be doing in media? It seems like the role, to some degree, has changed. You and many others have spent the last few years, basically committing thought crimes by and trying to avoid the Stasi, and get message out there and tell people the truth about what's going on. Now we reach a different place, and today is a day when, our own Chris Bedford is sitting there in that cabinet meeting asking Elon questions, and that's just the beginning. So what do you think the role of media is for shows like yours and the news?
I think the number one thing we have to do right now, more than anything, collectively on the right, Matt, on multiple fronts, is we have to seize this moment we have right now. Scott Rasmussen came out with a poll about 2 weeks ago that showed the Democrats were just way underwater on every issue of significance you could imagine. And you guys have been branded yourselves as the mandate here. I've never seen anything like this. I mean, I was 10 years old when Ronald Reagan won re-election in 1984. Maybe those polling numbers looked like that back then. I don't know, man. I was trying to watch the Detroit Tigers win the World Series. I wasn't paying attention. Okay, but in the time I've been doing this, I've never seen anything like this. An entire political party just largely discredited by the American people, and they're still unsure of where to go and what to do about it and where to go from here. We need to seize that momentum. And I think that support comes and that support comes in many ways. So, practice, the best, Jill, I know you come from sports like me. The best teams always tell you that practice was harder than the games. That with the way the coach challenged us in practice was harder than the games. One thing I love seeing right now, all right, is you saw Anna Paulina come after Pam Bondi and say, hey, you said you had the Epstein files on your desk. I'm running the subcommittee on this. Where are the files? You've got MAGA influencers, actually, that people I personally know and am friends with, that are now going after Anna Paulina, saying we don't need to do field trips to the book depository on the just release the. That's good. That is good and that is healthy, all right? Because that's an example of, if you want to have a great team, if you want this to be a movement and not a moment, all right, how we challenge and improve and support one another should be harder than when we actually step onto the set of MSNBC, should that still exist in the next 10 minutes, and get on a panel against those guys. That should be relief. Oh, this is the simple part, all right? That is actually healthy, rather than let's just all just get real comfortable. We won. Let's all just rake in the clicks and the money and enjoy ourselves and go back to being completely complacent, not knowing what a school board meeting is. This is actually the moment, I think, on multiple fronts, we need to seize the advantage.
We might have more than just a strongly worded letter for once in our lives.
Yes.
Steve, thanks so much for joining us.
You bet. Good to see you guys. Thanks.
Don't go anywhere. We will have Chris Bedford in his post-game interview from today's White House press pool right after this. Well, ladies, don't miss Share the Arrows. It's the event with Allie Beth Stuckey. If you missed out last year, you really did. So don't make the same mistake again, because this year is actually going to be even bigger and more powerful. It's going to be on October 11th here in Dallas, and Allie Beth Stuckey is hosting her second annual Share the Arrows event. You'll hear all the powerful teachings, experience inspiring worship, and connect with a community of women that are committed to living out their biblical truths in today's world. So men, if you have all the women in your lives, go encourage them to be there. The tickets go on sale this Friday, February 28th. So set a reminder and tell all your friends that they want to be a part of something that is truly life-changing. And of course, Blaze subscribers will get first access to the early bird tickets. Those tickets are on sale right now at sharethearrows.com. So go get your seat before all the best ones sell out. It's sharethearrows.com.
We just finished the scrum where we're in with President Trump's first cabinet meeting, and next we are going to be hopefully heading into the signing ceremony, which right now is listed as closed pressed, and they're being pretty tight-lipped about what it's going to be about. But hey, hopefully it might be something juicy to tell you about. I'll see you soon.
Well, that is Chris Bedford. He participated in the White House press pool today in the new media spot, and he joins us now to break it all down. So, Chris, tell us what it was like, your first experience. You're out there representing Blaze Media for the first time. So tell us what this was like for you.
The first thing is, it was really harrowing to hear my opening video there, because it's a reminder that I kind of sound like Brett Kavanaugh. I always thought I sounded more like Darth Vader. But anyways, it's funny. It's been a wild trip. Much of pool duty is kind of like waiting in an airport, wondering if the plane's mechanical issues are going to be resolved. Just waiting, and then suddenly it's a whole lot of action. And then in this case, we were bustled into a room with the cameras and a couple of reporters who were selected. This was the first time in history a new media reporter has been selected to be part of the pool. And there was, of course, some grumbling about that. There was a Huffington Post reporter, for example, who he was, as of yesterday morning, slated to be the print reporter. Instead, my colleague from Axios was doing that. So there was a little bit of grumbling, but generally friendly people. And then you walk in, and it's kind of wild, Trump's cabinet, when you think about it. I was just looking around the room. Usually when you have a White House cabinet, it's a lot of names that you're learning for the first time, people from the private sector, maybe some politicians, how many of the people in there you recognize, guys? How many of the people are known to the American public beforehand? It reminded me of Trump's promise in the 2016 that he was going to bring together the smartest people, the best people, only the best, to advise him. And that the room was filled with a lot of that, interesting characters. Of course, you had Elon Musk sitting on the left side of the room, of the cabinet room from where we walked in. Took some questions as well. Howard Lutnick taking questions. And President Trump holding court. And it was also kind of a great experience because, especially compared to the last administration, we had about 45 minutes to an hour of being able to ask questions of the president. And of course, there's that, I try not to be too rude, but you kind of do have to push and throw some elbows and get your question in to get attention, because there's a lot of other people there who really want to ask about their own stupid stuff and not the things that I think are more interesting to the American people.
So tell us about Elon, because I see already, right, we have journalists yelling about how Elon Musk is running the cabinet. You were there. You saw how this went down. How would you describe Musk's relationship to the cabinet and how he was acting today?
It's completely false from all these different people. I mean, you have to keep in mind, the only person who's in that entire room, including the press, who was actually elected to that position was Donald Trump. Everyone else was appointed. So some of them were confirmed. Elon Musk was sitting along the outside wall. He wasn't sitting at the main cabinet table. He's not a member of the cabinet or someone who's at cabinet level. And there was a lot of different people along the back. You might have seen Stephen Miller there, for example. And when he was called upon by the president, who he called the commander-in-chief in his remarks, when he was called upon to answer questions that were specific to what he was working on and he was advising on, then he gave answers in joining with the president. And you saw that with actual cabinet secretaries as well. The president would say, well, why don't you answer these questions about what we're working on here, whether you're at the Commerce Department or wherever. Maybe this question is best for you. Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense, answered some questions as well. So this is a narrative that reporters, like many narratives and many reporters, walked in with. They decided Elon Musk is in charge of this cabinet meeting. Neither in seating, nor in his deferential treatment, nor in the way he responded, nor in the way he answered questions was that the case. But they'd already planned it, so they're going to go with it.
Well, Bedford, I want you to think back to about like November 4th or so and say, you know what, in a couple months, I'm going to be sitting in a cabinet meeting with Elon Musk, and I'm going to ask him a question about Social Security, and he's going to do pulse checks. We did pulse checks, by the way, here already. We're all good. We're alive. We can actually go through and claim any benefits that we need from the federal government. But what was that moment like for you, just kind of going through, and then Elon's response?
We expected it. We all sat down here at Blaze and we knew this was coming. This was a time to really work and to get in there and to have access to be able to tell our listeners, our viewers, our readers about what's actually going on here in Washington, to get the questions that matter before the people that matter. Of course, when it actually does happen, it's a little bit of a, I better not screw this up moment. You always get that pressure. I still get that pressure, and I'm just waiting to call into the show or to beam in every night of, all right, be able to do your best, bring your best. People are tuning in. People are subscribing. They want to actually see what you can do, and they want to know something that a lot of other folks that have billion-dollar budgets and cable news aren't actually telling them and are hiding from them, or at least don't think is worth their while. So that was excellent. But I tell you what, I was in a bunch of meetings. I was in the Oval Office. I was in the cabinet room in the first president's term. And for all the whining and all the complaining you hear about access, I got this year. I must have, Joe Biden's invitation for me to come to the Oval Office or the cabinet room must have been lost in the mail, because that administration was not sending them out. And you hear all this stuff and all this crying. And there's a lot of confusion right now in the press school over how this is going to work, because it is a very complicated schedule. There's a lot of people who are trying to plan their lives. You saw reporters today looking around saying, I guess I should call my husband or wife to pick up the kids from daycare. There's no lid been called yet, which is when the press pool ends and you're no longer responsible for this aspect of reporting. The president's day is done. And things can get crazy very quickly. You could end up in a motorcade. The president could decide to go to Trump, try to go to one of his hotels or out to dinner. And then you have to call home and say, darling, I'm not going to make it home for supper. You and the kids are going to have to be on your own. All those logistics are going to have to be worked out by the White House in particular, and there's still a lot of confusion over how that's going to look.
Well, Chris, we have to say you came in and did a hell of a job walking in there and getting a question from Elon Musk. One of the central questions that everyone's asking in America about, are these people going to be fired or not? So we much kudos to you. You did a championship job today. I want to go into that tension and conflict within the media itself. I mean, it probably is worth explaining a little bit about how this has worked in the past and why they're so mad, and tell us a little bit more about how you see this playing out. Because the way I look at it, it looks like Trump just came in there and stirred up the hornet's nest. You posted a picture of people saying they stand with the AP. So these people seem like they're up in arms right now.
They are. There's certain people, although it wasn't as aggressive and mean and catty as it sometimes can be today. I was in there with James Rosen, also from Newsmax, and a reporter from Axios who'd been tapped, and none of us had been in that pool rotation. Rosen hadn't been to a cabinet meeting since George W. Bush's second term, so it was kind of a return for him to come back in there and cover that. And I'd tell you, for all the self-righteousness of some of the reporters, there was a few who could have been more polite. There's definitely some mean looks. The people, the job of a pool reporter is not simply to respond to their outlet they work for, but to be able to inform other members of the media who are not allowed in there and the wires what is going on, what the times are, who's in the room, and you can see from the cabinet room itself is hard to film. And you have to have a stationary shot on the president of the United States the entire time, and you've only got a little bit of time to set that up. So who's talking? Someone's off camera right now. It's not like the cameras can just suddenly swirl around and you see exactly who's talking. And you're kind of helping establish the permanent record. So even those reporters who were jerks, and I expect might be kind of mean in the future, rude, were satisfied when they were getting all the answers they needed and they realized the sky hadn't fallen in. And now what's settling in is confusion, because the White House Correspondents Association, which chooses who's in the pool representing what they have rotations, they have shifts, channels and outlets pay into a pot that pays for travel on Air Force One or travel on the chartered press flight that might be following Air Force One, to make sure there's someone going abroad, that there's someone going around domestically, and that there's always someone here in Washington when the pool is actually open. Are just kind of trying to figure out the logistics of this whole thing. So, okay, well, we're not in charge anymore. Who is in charge? And how is this going to shake out with the White House Correspondents Association no longer in charge of who's invited into the press room in the first place, or who's covering, if they're going to put a left-wing reporter from Huffington Post on there who the administration thinks lies about that? Why is that person picked? Well, you're probably not going to see that reporter being picked nearly as often anymore going into the future. You're going to see fresh blood. You're going to see new media outlets that aren't actually 20 years old, like the Huffington Post is, answering some of these questions and asking these questions of powerful people in the cabinet and in the White House.
Well, Chris, before you went into the White House today, I was up early this morning reading your Beltway brief, and I found it very interesting because you're saying right now the Democrat governors are talking a big game, but they're actually quietly pushing the Trump agenda. So how is Donald Trump even getting the Democrat governors to push the mandate right now?
So the Democrat governors, who seem to have a better political sense of what's going on than a lot of Democrat members of Congress and senators, these are people who are eyeing the White House and would like to be the presidential nominee for the Democrats in the future. And they've realized that 5 years of catering to kind of a left-wing revolution we've had since George Floyd and COVID and everything else that happened hasn't won them points with a lot of American voters. And Donald Trump has now won with a national majority. So even as much as Trump is leading the way in that, and they're seeing the polls about what's popular and what's unpopular, what he's doing is actually surprising them and how popular it is. Those people who do want to be president are trying to change course. I mean, you have J.B. Pritzker, governor of Illinois, out there saying that this, in his State of the State address, that Donald Trump's rise reminds him of the rise of the Nazis and Adolf Hitler. But at the same time, you see him taking hundreds of millions of dollars of the state budget away from paying for health care for illegal immigrants. You see Gavin Newsom establishing a $50 million fund to be able to sue Donald Trump and stop his actions from the White House. But at the same time, you see him telling his legislature, actually, no, we're not going to use taxpayer dollars for illegal immigrants into American homes that they now own. This is not what we're interested in doing. And all across
the board. The rhetoric is definitely tempered from 2017 to 2020. It is still rhetoric. It is still political, but the actions are things that you can tell they're going to want to say on that debate stage when they're challenged. No, I stopped that program. No, I changed that budget. No, I cut that spending, because that's what the American people have been responding to.
Well, Chris Bedford, thanks for making everybody here at Blaze Media look good today. You indeed did such a good job.
I look forward to on it again in the future.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Bedford. And MP, I think that it's one of those things where we just look and kind of say, this is a really big moment right now for Blaze Media.
Yeah, I mean, we don't make the story about us, but this story is important for everybody out there and for our audience, because this is something where, you spend years of your life moving to try to make the media a better place, doing the hard work of journalism as Chris has done. And then you have these moments where all of a sudden you do win, and we are winning. And the Trump administration understands that we need a free, fair, and balanced process when it comes to media. So it's an enormous moment for Blaze and all the people who've worked so hard here for so long. And I was overjoyed that Chris was the one who was there, and then he was able to ask Elon that question personally. This is good stuff, and it's just the beginning of what we have in store for all of you.
It's good. I like the wins. I'm all for keeping the wins coming. And you know what? There's a win out there potentially for the IRS. When we come back, is abolishing the IRS actually a good idea? We'll have your feedback right after this. Well, it's about that time of the year that everybody on the weekends are like, you know what? I think I have to start doing my taxes. And everybody gets depressed because nobody wants to do their taxes. Donald Trump is out there currently trying to make his tax cuts permanent. Dan Scavino, however, is doing something else. He went to X last night and he said, abolish the IRS. If you're wondering who Dan Scavino is, he is the White House Deputy Chief of Staff. So this is not a nobody out there in the administration. So I went to X today and asked you, what do you think? Is this a good move to actually do this, right? I think that people are all going to be on board with this. But here are some of the best responses. Adam replied, he wants a flat tax then. He said, pay annually on a postcard, no mess of deductions and credits and write-offs. I am all for this because, again, as the person who will have to be going through there and doing all the math that I don't want to be doing, I would like to just do one math problem instead of numerous pages and different, Schedule Fs and all that, whatever. There's too many.
I mean, I want it to be easier. I do kind of laugh whenever I hear the flat tax because I remember everyone being for it and me being for it, and it just kind of reminds me of 9999, like a gimmick, right? But it shouldn't be funny because it's the kind of thing that God forbid we simplify this complicated system, which enables all kinds of corruption and workarounds. So yeah, I get it.
Mark weighs in. He says, let's take a baby step and release the Epstein list. So Mark's going back to yesterday when people were like, hey, you know what? We can move on to bigger and better things. Mark's like, no, we're going to go back to yesterday's poll question and we're going to get that Epstein list.
I love you, Mark.
There.
I love Mark. Mark is just looking at Jill going, no, I'm not going to answer that question.
No.
I'm going to go back to yesterday and I'm going to say Epstein list now.
And I like that
One track.
What Steve Deace was saying earlier on the show about this, right? You now are in a time and period where Republicans are calling out other Republicans. This is, again, the Democrats are all usually one big party. They don't really infight. But when the Democrats are fighting, it's not really headlines like it is on the Republican side. Like the Republicans actually go after each other. Except this time, the Republicans aren't going after each other for the uniparty. They're going after each other for more conservatism, which is something that we haven't seen.
It is a great time to be alive. Every day that goes by, I am more and more full of joy because that's exactly what's happening. You have people on the right saying, oh, hell no, we're going to go this way. You need to work harder. And you can see them push and push and push and push. And you can see, as Steve was saying, on the left, you have this idea of, wait a minute, we should have been more to the right. Why couldn't we be reasonable on immigration? Why do we have to be for trans? I mean, so this is a real sea change. And it's happening over and over again. It's happening every day. where people are just getting called out for not going far enough.
Well, that's why Chris Bedford just said the Democrat governors have figured it out. They're all seeing how this wind is shifting. Lady Patriot will round it out today for us. She said Trump's anti-IRS stance is pure genius. Defund the bureaucrats, empower the people. Conservatives have been dreaming of this moment for decades. They certainly have. Everybody, this is, I think, if you could go through and say, oh, what's one of the departments, right? Okay, yes, the Department of Education, all these other ones. The IRS is the top of the top.
Yes, and remember, we're coming right out of a time in which the other side was going, we're going to add to the IRS. We're going to put a bunch more people.
87,000 IRS agents.
We're going to give them guns. We're going to put people with guns. More. We need more of them with the IRS. And you had the rest of the country going, oh my gosh, I'll meet you in the gulags, I guess, eventually, the way this is going. And now this is a real rollback. It's real. It's not fake. This is something that's actually happening. People are talking about these things. They're full of excitement and they're pushing forward.
Well, I want to go through and look at your final statement today, because it is something that we have looked at for quite some time on this show, which is just how the game is played, right? How to get the mandate pushed through. We need to know all of the little knobs that need to be turned right now.
Yeah, so today it's a perfect day to talk about how prestige and access works in general in human life. When you have higher prestige, you have more access to things, and access to things gives you more prestige, right? Those things go together. So, if you're famous, you go to a restaurant, you might get something free given to you, right? You might get access to something on the menu otherwise you wouldn't have, right? That little principle works throughout all of life. And the problem that we've faced in this country for a long time in media is that prestige being tied to access, and access being given by institutions that were controlled by the left, the conservative media didn't have any prestige. And to some degree, it wasn't their fault. Don't get me started, because I can complain about the right and how shoddy a lot of people on the right are, and a lot of right-leaning media institutions are, but they never had a chance if they didn't get the access that other organizations do. So you can take people who are completely incompetent, but all of a sudden they have a lot of prestige if you give them access to the right people. So what do I mean by that in the journalistic context? It's very simple. The most powerful people in the world, to some degree, work in, mostly Washington, D.C. in America, the most powerful people in the federal government, right? And the White House is the ultimate symbol of that. And so the way that this works is that who you give access to, who you decide to talk to about what's going on if you're in power, creates instant prestige and credibility. Well, when it comes to some of those powerful people and the powerful agencies in the world, like the intelligence community, for instance, this is what makes the Washington Post or the New York Times so powerful. Those people will talk to them and them only, right? So in your own life, you increase that prestige by who you talk to and who you don't. And this is what they've been doing for a long time. It almost is comical what they've done in the past in the White House, where they just would keep out all sorts of, alternative media, because in a way it was sort of like high school, not the cool kids. And you can pretend it's about credibility. You can pretend it's about all these other factors, which at various times and places they have. But at the end of the day, this was really about who you were allowing in, because you knew they would be part of, your ideology, your party, and go along sort of with the crowd. So what the Trump administration is doing is something very different than other people on the right have done. In the past, the right played the prestige game. In the past, the right, Republicans, they would just go to the New York Times and Washington Post and be, so grateful that the wonderful, intelligent people who work at those institutions gave them a breadcrumb, right? And they would still play the game. They were still in that framework. Same with TV. It's shameful how the right operated in the past. And you had a lot of people, myself included, Jill included, many others of us coming up going, why are we doing this? Why is this happening? You shouldn't care at all what they think. You have to establish your own institution, be confident enough to say, we're going to have our own prestige and excellence scale, and to hell with yours. That's what just happened. The Trump administration is full of people who understand how this works and are going to give a bunch of different outlets a chance, which is the free and fair way to do it. It's essential for the health of democracy, for the health of the Republican form of government, for the health of the body politic, for the health of American citizens such as yourself who need to make informed choices and need a variety of views. Today is a historic day because Blaze Media is the new media in that White House pool. Chris Bedford walked in and asked Elon a question. It's just the beginning of many more. And it's a beautiful day to be an American because that prestige and access is now open in the way that it should be to every deserving network.
I remember Tucker Carlson back during this primary season when we had the summit on Blaze Media, which was another huge moment in just tearing down legacy media. And Tucker Carlson was up on stage interviewing all the candidates, and he was like, you know what? All these candidates up here, they all still care about what the New York Times says about them, and they need to stop it.
Yes.
And it's been kind of since that moment that has really been a fire that has been lit under the conservative side of the movement, and saying, you know what, like we need to just go through and actively say this. It can't just be, kind of on the fringe. It has to be that forefront at the center of this movement.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean you go and agree with everything or some ideology. Just no, we're going to ask the questions because we actually understand the landscape better. We just won. We understand the landscape better than the other side does, and there's serious questions that always need to be asked by media of anyone in power, and we will do that. Chris did that today, but the important thing is just leaving them behind and building this thing that we're building here with us, and we need you to do that. We have to build this thing ourselves. We have to band together and create the media we want and deserve, and that is what we intend to do, and today was a great big step in the right direction.
And last weekend when we were in Washington, D.C., we see the power actually going out to the MAGA youth movement, right? All of the young kids that are in there getting the White House jobs and everything, and actually talking to them and seeing as the administration is getting built, even at the small framework that is currently in place, it's like, man, we are the ones that have the power now.
Yeah, it's a youth movement, as we've been saying, and it's full of all kinds of people and a lot of personality and a lot of joy, and really that is going to create its own draw. So even when it comes to the party, like what's the actual prestigious party now? Well, I think it's more like the ones that we were going to, where it is hard to get in, but when you get there, these are the people who are on your side, and they're happy, and they're coming together and they're talking excitedly about what they can do to change this country for the good. That's where the energy is. That's where you want to be. That's what's attractive. Not this old thing of these dead institutions, this dead and gone media that's just sitting around like a bunch of crybabies complaining about this now. The train has left the station. Like we're moving forward.
Everybody in legacy media, they aren't even having their shows anymore. They're picked off one by one right now. So what is even going to happen in the next year or 2 years? Well, we'll be here to break it all down for you. Thanks for watching the show, everybody. We'll see you back here tomorrow night.
I mean, I was crying last night for hours about Joy Reid. It was
yeah, everybody.